Hi, I'm Monica Dupé,
And I'm Grant Denton,
and this is Good Intentions, Bad Outcomes.
where we unpack all the bullshit related to homelessness so that you can help and advocate in a more meaningful way. And today's episode is to sweep or not to sweep.
It's a tough one.
It is a tough one, kind of, right? Because
Just controversial. There's a lot of feelings and emotions involved with whether we should sweep or not. That's why I say it's a tough one.
yeah, well, like, of course it's tough to see people displaced. I remember back when I started working in this field out here, it was like 9 years ago. I went in a van with the VOA, and they would go out to the homeless camps, and they would talk to folks and hand out flyers. I think that was like the method of outreach then. Just you hand out a flyer and be like,
Trying to
hey,
get
whenever you're ready, man. You know? And that was across the board, man. And I remember seeing in the news, I wasn't around for those kind of sweeps. I was working at a methadone clinic then. But from what I heard, they were so bad. I mean, maybe you were around then. Like,
Yeah, I was around, and a lot of the times the sweeps would just come out of a frustration, like a point that maybe the cops or the city or the county would just get too many phone calls. There would be just too much garbage, or a campsite just had too much violence, too many cop calls at it. And the reaction was more coming out of not a coordinated, a tactical response, but more of a reaction.
yeah. Well, and I think that there have, like, you know, you got guys that are police officers that, you know, most people decide they want to be. Ask a kid. They're like, hey, man, what do you want to be when you grow up? When they're like, I want to be a cop. You ask them why, they're not going to say, so I can clear homeless camps and manage homeless shit. Like, no cops, nobody does that.
Right.
Cops don't want to do that. That's not their gig. And I think they're sending folks out there like with a cop brain, you know, with a cop mindset, dealing in a social circle or a social bubble. Do you know?
Well, and I think right now your story, to help people kind of understand what goes on in a mind that has to deal with certain behavior over and over and over. Talk about the tolerance scale for a second, and how you go out there with a lot of tolerance.
Well, here's like, I learned this through a police officer in a no, it wasn't police. It was a Marine or something. And what it goes like is they have that scale from 1 to 10, and one is the least amount of what am I looking for? What word?
Firmness,
yes, right? Like intensity,
yes,
right?
Yes,
one.
yes.
So, and we'll just say in the sense of a tent, and when a police officer goes to a tent or an individual, and they're like, hey, man, I'm going to need you to move your tent. How much time do you need? 24 hours, 48 hours? Okay, that's cool. And then they come back 48 hours later, and the tent isn't moved. And so the level of intensity goes from a 1 to a 2. And 2 is like, hey, bud, we talked about this yesterday. I agreed. You agreed. We're going to need to move that tent. How much time do you need? We already said 48. Let's make it 24. Can you do 24? And then they come back 24 hours later, and the tent's still there. They're like, dude, I don't want to write you a ticket. I can write you a ticket, bro. We don't want to do that. We don't want to put folks in jail for, you know, and then to a 4 and to a 5, and to where 10 is actually go to a jail, and 9 is we take your shit, right? And I think that what happens is when police are sent out here, they already start at whatever worked last time. So last time
makes sense. It's effective. It's efficient. They have other things to do. So it makes sense.
Yeah, and you look at the time in between, and this is what I've seen is like the time in between, like is, you know, you got 2 days, then 1 day, then 1 day, then another day, then another day, and it takes forever. And the more that someone's in this camp, the more things build up. You know, the more stuff they
The
acquire.
problem stays unresolved, and so
Unresolved. Yeah, and so like, not that anybody should be mean to a human, but sometimes I get it, you know.
Well, what would the answer be? I mean, if you make an agreement and then you don't hold to it, and someone comes back out and gives you a new agreement, and you don't hold to it, I mean, it makes sense that there would be a frustration that would be building at that point. And then if you're using people whose means to fix a situation are handcuffs in jail and court dates, then it just doesn't seem like a good alignment maybe for the issue that we're dealing with and then the type of folks we're sending out to deal with the issue. And so I can see where, sweeps haven't always gone right in Reno.
Well, in anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Same gig, right? You got the police stations are officers having to deal with this situation historically, like ends up the same most places you go. And then you have to look at it from the homeless individual's perspective. I remember watching when and Sparks did this, and it was all over the news. It was all over the news, right? There was this little park that had turned into a village, right? Right on Truckee. Right, it was on the Sparks truck, the Sparks Reno border, right? Yeah, it was the line there.
The 1, 2, 3, not it line?
Yeah. So where Reno, it was historically Reno would come through and sweep their property, and then they would go over to Sparks, and then Sparks would clear it out, and they would come back to Reno, and they would do this every 4 months, 5 months, and it was just this back and forth, and it was about 2 months after Reno had swept their side, and they went over to the Sparks side in this park. I can't remember the name of it, but there was and they went and they wanted to be, because there was by this time there's local activists that were like, stop the sweep, these are people's things that you're taking, and there was pressure to give a lot of notice, not just 2 days, but a lot of notice. And so Sparks put a sign up that said 1 month. It was a freaking month, a whole month. We're going to clear this camp. And in our minds, we're like, that gives you a month to either, identify a shelter or find another place to go to. Because if you don't want to get off the streets, and maybe the services that you need aren't there yet, and so it'll give you a little bit of time to get off the streets. And so that's a month to go. But it didn't happen like that, right? It was, the camp actually grew because people knew that camp wouldn't be messed with for a month, right? And in the logistics of homelessness, it makes more sense to stay till the last day, because you could move right now and go somewhere where you're going to get asked to move in another day.
Right.
And so logistically, it makes sense to stay till the last day. And that's where shit gets weird, right? Is because we stay till the last day, because it makes sense, because sometimes the police are bluffing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just a bluff, and they don't come for another month or so. Right. So it's and it makes more sense for a homeless individual to stay till the last day. And that's where most of our...
Or just to test how truthful we are.
Sure. Because calling their bluff actually kind of works out for you a little bit.
It clearly has, or they wouldn't be doing it over and over.
But yeah. And so that's, and we saw it happen there. And then that was on that day that camp was there for 2 months. They gave notice, about 2 months. They gave notice, and then another month went by, and that was in the TED Talk I did. You saw all that stuff that woman had, that she'd acquired, and I was there when she moved over, because we were doing outreach on the Reno side when everybody moved over to the Spark side. And remember, she went over with just a tent and that, and acquired all that stuff in that time. Do you know?
From people bringing things down and handing it out, because that was such a large camp, and just not knowing better, a lot of people just felt like, gosh, there must be so much need in this camp, when really it ultimately led to a lady having, I don't even remember how many bins and bags and things she had, but it was probably enough to go into a little studio.
Yeah, you couldn't, you'd have to get a bigger storage for it. There wasn't even a storage big enough for it. They had to get her own sea container, 20-foot sea container for all the things, and somebody had to pay for that. Do you know?
And that's interesting, because we seem to have such a confliction going on in our society right now around how we should deal with the homeless, where some people are like, why would you give her a 20-foot shipping container so she could collect more stuff and she could keep things she's not even using right now? And these are just things that were given to her while she was in a homeless camp. Like, how important could they even be to her? And then you have the other side saying, those are her family heirlooms, and
those are her things.
Yes, and those are her things, and we should help people hang on to what they have, and in a way, I do agree. Of course, documentation and anything important to you that was given to you from your family, and I'm all about that kind of stuff. But in all actuality, if or when this lady turns her life around, will she even want those things? They were things that were collected at a homeless camp.
Yeah, and most of those things, knowing that that knowing her when she moved in there with a tent, a cooler, and a backpack, and a sleeping bag, like knowing those things and watching her accumulate this stuff, like these weren't things that were just for survival. Do you know what I mean? And
Right,
it wasn't
clearly,
like things
yeah.
that she's going to hold over, but they were things that anchored her to homelessness, right? She had a daughter in California. She couldn't go to California
much
now.
stuff.
She had too much stuff. She couldn't go to the shelter, couldn't go to treatment. That was her excuse. But what about my stuff? What about, and it's a
Right.
valid argument because those are now her things. Do you know? Whether she got them yesterday, today.
That's interesting because me and you have talked about, primary and secondary rights. And like if you literally have collected a bunch of things at a camp and it's preventing you from going into the next step that's helping you get to the highest form of potential that you could make it to.
Yeah.
Who decides that? And I know these are very controversial things that have kind of come up in homelessness. So I would say over the last 10 or 15 years that these are not problems that we used to have to deal with. Most of the people that we dealt with in homelessness 20 years ago, all they had was their backpack and their bag and their cooler. But the hoarding is now a DSM, and we have a lot of people who are homeless that are hoarding. And it makes me curious. Again, me and you talk about these things all the time, but where are the pilot programs for folks that are hoarding? And I could see where a pilot program has funding to pay for the storage and that kind of thing, but to burden the just normal homeless system that is so under-resourced and so overburdened right now, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because if you're going to get her a shipping container, you got to get everybody a shipping container. So, because I do believe in equality and equity, and when we start getting into things like that to keep a squeaky wheel quiet,
Oh yeah.
that isn't an effective or a sustainable approach in my mind. But I mean, that's a whole nother topic. But the whole hoarding and the collection of things and who's paying for stuff, because these are legitimate, real concerns. And it would be nice when I see some of the advocates that are out there with no sweeps. What's the alternative?
Yeah.
Because you can't just say no to something without an alternative when you see the problems with your eyes growing.
So I remember this was such a huge learning period for me. It was in 2020, 2021. 2020 was when we started doing outreach out there, and you're watching and I'm observing all the things. And then, in order to build, like two of the biggest problems you'll have in a camp is environmental and behavioral issues. And, of course, I'm not going to solve all the behavioral issues, but I can help with the environmental issues. And so what I did was I would go get trash bags, and I would walk by people's camp and be like, hey, man, can I help you clean up your camp? And that was it. And all we did was clean up trash. And all we did was clean up trash. And I was able to watch how this culture developed, how the culture operated, how this organism moved. And that was like, it was really eye-opening to see how things worked in these camps, to see the community that was built, that on the, and watch how the helpers engage in this organism and how the helpers affect and impact this organism when they come in. It was so interesting to watch. I remember because the sweeps were coming, right? They're going to clear that place. But the city and the CDC, right? The city stopped sweeps during that moment where there was the shelter in place. CDC said you can't move anybody from a camp because of COVID, because it was it could spread the spread of COVID, and so these camps stayed the same. That camp got big underneath the Wells Bridge. It got to about 250 people. It undulated, sometimes more, sometimes less, but it got pretty big. And watching this camp and how they responded to the helpers, and I remember the helpers. A couple of them came out and asked me, a couple of advocates came out, met with me and asked me, why don't you, because I had managed to get the city to lean in to help me clean up trash, and managed to get a contract with working with the county to have a workforce program, and then we managed a contract with the city to get a bigger outreach. So we're actually like working in the camp and getting to know the folks and cleaning up and moving folks to where they wanted to be if they wanted to go. So we started, and so they thought I had it, they were leaning on my influence of the city to give me ideas. And these advocates came out and they were like, why don't you get a dumpster out here instead of the city moving them. Why don't you get a dumpster? And it's that way everybody can throw their trash away.
Sure.
And that's like assuming that people will throw their trash in a
Right.
dumpster, right? And a lot of argument for putting a dumpster in so the city wouldn't do it, right? And part of that was because
other people might throw their garbage in it.
That's it.
God
right?
forbid we're throwing away trash, people.
Yeah. So the city, well, they wouldn't do it because putting a dumpster there means that they okayed the camp, right? Would be this is like the idea that if we put a dumpster.
These are but I think it's important for you to share this because these are the parameters that you have to work within when you're trying to come up with an idea to pitch.
Yeah. And so and that's right? Once the city says, yes, put a dumpster there, that's mean the city say, yes, the camp's okay. Not if it wasn't just for a cleanup, if it's for this constant where we're paying monthly and we're paying for services. Well, so I got funding and I put a dumpster out there myself. And what happened was, and it wasn't like people were like, a lot of people were like, don't put a dumpster out there because they'll light it on fire. I'm like, actually, the fire is the least.
Right.
Like it's contained, the trash is kind of gone now,
Right.
as long as there's not shit next to it lighting up, like, is it the fire? Like
Is
a
it
dumpster
the
fire. In this world, dumpster fires are the least of our problems.
Right.
And so but what it was the illegal dumping. People started to bring their own shit out.
Furniture,
Yeah,
things
they
like
would,
that,
like folks would drive by or they would, and I don't know who, but like people would come to the camp at night and on the weekends and dump their sheetrock, tires, all these things like off at this camp.
Just costly stuff. Yeah.
And so we're dumping their shit. And so it was it wasn't the homeless folks that were causing the problem. It was the rest of the people. And so I had a great idea to fence up this dumpster. And so we got it fenced up and it was donated. It was great. And we had a lock and I had the key. I was the only guy with the key. And what happened was people didn't stop dumping. They was just putting their shit on the outside of the fence now.
And let you
then
take it
I
in.
had to throw it away. Yeah,
Right.
dude, it caused a bigger problem.
Right.
And so now no more permanent dumpster. Now we could only like put our trash in a heap and hopefully they don't, because they still kept dumping illegally, right? And that's how that outside world impacts the inside. So like, and then there was this argument where they were like, well, you should get porta potties out there because part of the gig with moving this camp was the pollution, right? We poop under the bridge, right? And we're pissing, we're shitting right there in the water. And that's 80% of our drinking water comes from there, right? And there was the pollution issue. And they're like, well, this problem would be solved. And we had the Portland Loo, but it just wasn't enough, for that many people.
Well, and if it's too far, people won't walk all the way to it.
Oh, yeah, you have to walk down the bridge, come back up to Broadhead Park. And so people, it was like, why don't we get these porta potties out there? And it sounds like a valid argument. Wow, yeah, porta potties, man. Let's get a few out there for the people. But like, the issue wasn't the actual porta potties. It was like what happens in them. Is that these porta potties were also being used. People were dumping oil in them. A lot of folks would take their clothes off in them because there's we can agree that there's some mental illness on the streets, and people were taking off, changing their pants and their clothes in there, putting things inside
that were not
sewage, not the higher functioning folks. Of course, there are people out there that want to mend it, but if you can't manage the sickest of the group, then you got a problem.
Right.
And when they would come out, this happened in Portland, right? Those honey pots, those red honey pots. When we went out there during COVID, they were all over the place because the homeless needed somewhere to use the restroom, but they stopped servicing them because in order to service them, you have this little hole about this big on a tube, right? That's has to suck your shit out of there, and it's getting caught up with pants and shirts and shoes and all the
sorts
things.
of
non-poop things.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's bigger than poop, right?
Yeah.
So and that was causing a problem. So they didn't even want to. They stopped servicing them on the streets there, and so and the thing is like sure. Porta potties, but then you're going to have somebody manage them because if people start putting stuff in there. So it's not just about the thing, it's about the management of the thing.
I often wonder why the advocates who are so outspoken yet run nothing, why they don't start something around this. I mean, these are needed things at the campsites, but they need monitoring and supervision and upkeep. They're not something that you can just put out there and it just takes care of itself. It just manifests its own sustainability
Yeah, like
plan.
propane.
Right. But it would be really nice though, because I see a lot of different areas that are kind of gapped out that are smaller project type stuff, but I don't really see a lot of people stepping up to provide these types of projects. I see them spending more of their time hating and nagging on people that are doing things. And it would just be very helpful if they would step up in a way, like instead of protesting a sweep, where are you for the low-income housing? Where the heck are you? Like, I barely see anybody speak out for low-income housing in this community. There's opportunities for them to really make a difference in these folks' lives, and it often makes me wonder if it's more about them therapizing themselves or if it's really about helping the homeless, because I don't see them working on the things that would actually make a huge difference in a homeless person's lives, which is low-income housing. A shelter life is not going to make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Getting into your own place would, though, and a pathway to that instead of like staying stuck in an area where they're mad about the sweeps. Like help get the dumpsters in there. Help create a plan where you can supervise and monitor those dumpsters, because I still do think we need dumpsters and we need porta potties.
Yeah.
But I also think they need to be supervised and monitored so that we can sustainably provide them out there and not continuously run into a problem where clothing is clogged this up.
And it's silly. Yeah. Well, and if you look at it, like that's how we look at things, is like, this is an opportunity to learn. This is an opportunity to teach. If you have, and that's why when I started doing outreach at Broadhead Park, it was around the Portland Loo, to like define what that loo was, what that toilet was for. Because the fear is that people were going to live in it and turning it into a shooting gallery, which is funny. That's my favorite, is when people that have never done drugs call fucking places shooting galleries.
Yeah.
Those of us who have been like IV users never say shooting galleries.
Right.
So like, it's going to turn into a shooting gallery. Like, stop.
Like you're going to go out of your way to go over to Broadhead so that you can use the shooting gallery.
Gosh, I really got to get high today. Where's that bathroom at?
Yeah, the shooting gallery.
Yeah, of course we have. That's where the shooting should be, right?
Yeah.
Is in the bathroom, not outside of the bathroom. With drug addicts, we have weird relationships with bathrooms, but we just got to move on. We just can't hang out there.
I do think that much like everything, lots of stuff has evolved over the last 15, 20 years, but sometimes it seems as though some of the folks in charge with solving problems have not evolved. So they're not aware that actually isn't a thing anymore, and that people will just shoot up at their camp. They'll just do it where I've seen people in the streets just do it openly on the sidewalk and stuff. It's not as hidden as it used to be.
But for me, it's okay, right? If you want them to shoot up anywhere, that would be the place.
Yeah.
Do you know? And of course, like there's risk of overdose. You always risk this, whether it's on the streets, in a tent, or in a Portland Loo, right? Like you always have that risk. But that's like kind of where, my gig is that like you're okay. You want them to shoot in the streets? Is that what people are gonna do whatever they're going to do. And we have weird relationships with bathrooms when you're a drug addict. And so like my argument with that wasn't that they're going to shoot in there. It's just we got to get in, we got to keep moving. It's for the whole spot.
Yeah, it's like you're not going to not do something for the one person who's going to misuse it.
Yeah. So and that's what it was. It was for the people that'll misuse it. It's for the I am very grateful for the Portland Loo going in. I think it's been a success over there at the park, and so I'm grateful for it. More bathrooms and more garbage collection areas, I'm all for. I think that I would rather have those in place and then teach people how to throw their garbage away than to just keep cleaning up after people. And that's what it was when I first started doing that outreach over there. It was around that Portland Loo and introducing people to it and telling them, hey, this is for everybody. You guys want this? You want it to stay? You got to behave that way. You want it to stay? You got to behave that way.
Yeah.
We got to clean up after it. Like, this is our chance, right? Do you guys ever, you believe, you ask them, who believes that there's a stigma against homeless people? Everybody raises their hand. Like, you know where that comes from? Homeless people, right? Yeah. So a lot of it comes from us, right? Yeah. There's a stigma against drug addicts. You know who made that stigma possible? We did some shit, Yeah. And so, in order to flip that, let's take care of this Portland Loo. Let's do that. So I guess what I was getting at is that all these things are opportunities to learn and to teach, and everything that we teach somebody on the streets can be taken with them on their way out, which will
Right.
keep them out, you know?
And I really like that about you because one of the things I noticed about you to other workers that work with folks in the street, you speak life into people. Like you take that moment to speak life into them, to speak to them in a way that they can see a different life for themselves. And I think that that is something that's missing from a lot of people who go out and try to help the homeless is they don't really even know who they're dealing with. And I feel like you really do know who you're dealing with. You speak life into them and you hold them accountable to a standard because you believe that they can meet the standard. You don't they may have given up on themselves and may not even think they can walk their garbage 7 feet from their camp, but you haven't given up on them. You believe in them and you speak to them in a way where you're speaking life into them. And if they don't respond to that, you're speaking to them in a way where you're making them aware that they're part of the problem and not part of the solution.
Yeah.
Because it's a choice that they're then making. If they're capable of it and they can do it and they're just choosing not to, then you switch that conversation. And I have to say, a lot of people don't know how to do that out in the street. They don't have that kind of awareness or regulation to be able to be vulnerable and speak the life and then be confrontational, where the result of your confrontation does lead to greater intimacy. You are trying to build greater intimacy and a deeper connection with folks. And so I admire that.
Well, and you'll see folks that we've been working with for a while, and there's always a magic number when people are looking into programs, looking into your shelter, looking into your sober living house, looking into your rehabs. Be like, and the question is, how long does it take? When you talk to any, how long does it take to turn this person into a regular
when
human
will they
being?
be fixed? When will you have
when will
this
the
person
fixing
fixed?
take place?
Yes.
3 months, 6 months, 30 days, and it's all silly, right? It's
Can
all
you give
silly.
me a list of the wraparound services that would be required to fix people?
Especially this guy.
Yeah.
My little buddy here. You know, like it's, and that's what it be like. It takes a while to get folks to change everything. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
We're trying to change everything. So, but on our way there, all right, you just stay here in this tent until we get everything changed, then we go, right? There's a process. And what should we learn first? Well, it's how to become socially competent would be the first thing, right? Mm-hmm. Because now you're going to have to get around other people. How do you behave around other people? How do you manage your footprint and the impact that you have? You can't do that when you get your own apartment. You're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to do that once you get in a bed into a treatment center. So these are the things is social competence comes first, right? And then we start working on work ethic. And then we start working on the other things. You can't we don't want to, and I think that's people's gig is we want to hurry up and fix all the things first or wait for the system to be fixed first, which will never happen, Right. But yeah.
And that has to make you even that much savvier out there is to realize, and I hate to rag on it, but we're helping people build lives within broken systems. Mm-hmm. We cannot wait around. They don't have the luxury to wait around for for circumstances and conditions to change before they make a move. And so within those circumstances and conditions, what can we do right now? What makes the next best sense to do? And then the next best sense, and then the next best sense. And that is the reality of majority of us that are working in the homeless field is that's what we're doing. There isn't any kind of do this and this thing is guaranteed. Do this and this thing is guaranteed. There's no guarantees.
Yeah, you do this to do this.
Yes.
And if you put your head down and you keep grinding, it'll happen. It is frustrating. It's a long road. It's a lot tougher to get off the streets than it is to do most anything in life.
But also this process that people go through helps them build self-awareness that they don't have. It's helping them build more regulation over their emotions because they can't do that. And they have to start controlling themselves there. And they can't just abruptly outburst anymore here. And they can't and we're talking about non-severe mentally ill folks here. We're just talking about the majority of who's at the shelter or who's in campsites, and learning these things is what's going to get them towards a life that they are going to enjoy.
Yeah. So then I remember having said that, I remember after watching how this organism works untouched, right? Without anybody coming to shift it. And I think the only I had an impact on it because when we were in that camp, we were people were working. We were giving them a platform for purpose. We were exchanging them helping us clean up trash for gift cards, folks. And then we were getting to know them. We were logging people into HMIS. We're putting them on this by name list. We were starting to know our population. But at the same, and when you hear, like, I remember hearing that before I started working out there, stop the sweeps. And it's like, yeah, man, that kind of sucks, dude. How they sweep these folks, you know? And then when you start living in it, you start seeing things a little bit differently. And just, I mean, when you're working out there 8 hours a day, you're spending more time with this population than you are your family. You spend more time with this population than you do your family. So you're able to watch how things unfold. And I remember, like, when things started to shift, and you have to ask, like, when is it a problem? When does a camp become a problem? Do you know? Is it one tent? When somebody sets up one tent, is that a problem? And they're keeping their area clean. When there's two tents, is two tents a problem, right? Out of sight, out of mind. They're not really bothering anybody. 3 tents, 4 tents, 5, 10. Then what? Then when is it a problem? Is all 10 people cleaning up all their trash and being mindful? And how many people, if everybody cleans up their trash and behaves well and is kind to each other and we're good neighbors and we're minding our P's and Q's, if there's 50 tents, then is it a problem? Do you know? And we have to decide, when are things a problem? And for most camps, it's even if it was 50 and there's no real issues, there's still an issue. Do you know?
Yeah, that's what's kind of disturbing right now, is that we're not really taking the time to sit down and discern that.
Yeah.
Like so to me, it seems like when it's a problem is when too many people complain about the dirtiness of it, or there's too much theft that's happening around the neighborhood of it, and that it's done more in a retaliatory or retributive type of way. Sorry, I can't even talk. But it's done out of...
I was rooting for you. I'm like, retro.
But the retribution of it, like wanting to just punish instead of sitting down and really coming up with, look, we only allow when it's this, or we don't allow it at all.
Yeah.
But like coming up with a policy that we follow no matter what, and that isn't just triggered by someone's annoyance or frustration. Because I don't really believe that we should be handling any of these problems with frustration. The people that are living homeless are living far worse in their frustration than we are with having to be bothered with dealing with the building a policy or something, or having to field phone calls. I mean, we go home at night, we have homes. And so we really have to check ourselves in that way, that we allow ourselves to just get so angry and then react and then act horribly while we're doing our jobs. Yeah.
It's, and I like, so you look at why sweep the camps. And there are two things going on with us at that time. And every city has a different gig, right? Depending on the culture. And we have our river, right? And it's a great infrastructure. If you're homeless, it's a good idea to stay next to the river. You got running water. You can wash your dishes in them. You can wash your clothes. You can drink from this water. Yep. It's a great gig. And so our river at that time was drawing a lot of homeless folks. And what I remember, there was a group that came out, and this is what were they called?
Was your flood management group?
Flood management, something, man. The group came out, a lot of guys. They had big old trucks, and they asked me to help them clear the camps from the bank of the river, and they were cutting down all these trees, and they were pulling, because some of the trees were dying and falling into the river, and they were pulling these trees out, and what they were doing was this group was started in a response to the 1997 flood that caused $700 million.
Yeah, it was huge. Yeah, it was bad flood.
Yeah, worth of damage. And one of the reasons for the flood is because there was so much debris, branches, trees, and not just branches and trees and plants in that. It was homeless things. Like there was
clothes and blankets.
Clothes and tents. And tents can really block up the bottom of a bridge, right? Mm-hmm. All this stuff is supposed to, when it floods, right, the water is supposed to go under the bridge. And when these things block up the bridge, the water goes over. Yeah. And that was one of the reasons for a lot of the damage that happened, was that these bridges were being blocked up by debris. And so they came out and they started, pulling the things out because that camp had gotten so big and it started to get attention, big enough to get attention. And I remember they came out and I asked them, what was going on. And they started to tell me, like, here's, that the problem with this particular camp right here and a lot of the camps is the debris that, that's taken into, that's moved down the river, that's pulled down the river when the water rises and it starts flooding and it blocks it up. And I asked, well, why can we just, is there enough time to pull the stuff up or whatever? And they're like, nah, it doesn't happen like that. But also with, can we know when flood season is so we can just clear out?
Can you just let us know? Put a little horn down here. Yeah.
And the guys are like, well, part of the gig too isn't just the flooding, it's the environmental portion of it where the from going up and down the banks, walking up and down the banks, the erosion of the root structure, a lot of the plants, and these plants are dying and the trees are dying and the shade is not there anymore. And so the temperature of the river was starting to increase, and livestock that lived in these bushes, that lived in the trees and all that are going away. Or animals, I said livestock, but you know what I mean? Yeah. There's freaking cows and shit down there. No, but like the animals that like survive. It's
changing the environment around the river.
Yeah, and so that was one of the reasons for the sweeps, which made sense. They're like, dude, you can't camp 300 feet. That's where the rule come from. You can't camp 300 feet, not only for the pollution, but also for the flood risk and the environmental risk. So there was that. And then right when I remember they started the sweeps when they opened the CARES campus, right? The CARES campus opened, you got about 400 beds.
Because it would make sense that if you have all these unsheltered people and then you open up this place that has all these beds for unsheltered people, that all these people would move from being outside to going inside, but that's not what actually happened.
It's never like that. I think, the longer people are in a place, the more it's theirs, And
I think it's important for people to realize that a lot of these common sense types of things that we think, that kind of normal people think, like, well, they need housing or they need shelter, and then the shelter opens that they're going to go into the shelter. There's a lot of people that don't really want to follow rules. They don't want to be around other people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons that people have for, like, maybe they're a nighttime person. They don't want to be sleeping at night around everybody else, so they sleep in the daytime in a park. They stay up all night. Like, there's just a lot of different reasons why people have, and some people are like, the shelter's not safe. There's those people too, but there's a lot of reasons why people don't go to the shelter. And when we're talking about those folks, we're then having to talk about pilot programs or specialized housing programs or things like that if we're trying to get everybody off the streets.
Well, and that's a tough one, right? How are you going to get everybody? Because there's so many different folks there, and like this is kind of where we learned, right? When like the longer someone's out living in a certain way, when change is introduced, like it's tough. And what we did was, well, what RPD did, because they were tasked with clearing it, right? And we were the outreach guys. And so they met with us, and they also met with advocates, some other advocates. And we sat in a meeting in the police station, and they're like, and they sectioned out which parts of the river from Lake Street all the way down to Rock, or to Fisherman's 2, right? Which parts of the river were going to go at what date. And what was going to happen was that a week before, me and my outreach team would get into this section and say, hey guys, we got to get moving. They're coming in a week. We can take you to the shelter. We can take you to treatment. We can take you to detox. It's time. And of course, nobody moves until the last day. Most people won't move till the last day.
Right.
Some people were going to the shelter, and they could ticket them now. Not just because of the river, but because we had enough beds for this to respond to this Martin versus Boise gig, right?
Right.
So we had enough beds,
which was a lawsuit that was preventing government from pushing people off of public spaces.
It was interpreted two different ways. The Martin versus Boise. It was, you can't ticket this guy, one person, unless there's one bed available for him. Or it was interpreted that if there's 400 people in your point in time count, you have to have 400 available beds at that time. And when the shelter was open, it honored that number, right? So we had enough shelter beds, and so it's like, dude, you got to move, or else they're going to ticket you, and it could be for 300 feet within the river because of the environmental thing, or it could be you just can't be camping, and we do have beds available. And so it was. So they sent us out before, and go out. We're working with folks. Some want to go, some don't want to go. You're running into some of the fuck you guys, and then after they clear this section, what would happen is people would move, and then we would. When the police are working in this section, we're doing this week, and they would be there for a week, right? We're doing a week right here, preparing this section, and it went on and so forth. So we were in front of the police doing outreach, trying to get people to the camp.
Prevention before they
so they
came
didn't have to deal with this, like, bro, take your tent right now, let's get going, or let's get to the shelter. And I can't tell you have to go to the shelter, and we can't tell you have to go to treatment, but they're coming, dude. So it's going to be a lot harder to live on the streets. We got to move to the next phase. And through this whole gig, right there, instead of helping get folks to the shelter, there was a group that was like, stop the sweeps, that was out there really pushing against these sweeps, and really like, it seemed like working to make the population living there more upset without, like, you're not going to stop these sweeps, but then there's also like, you're not helping in that way by telling them that these pigs,
just to resist, basically.
Yeah, resist. What, or do you want them to live here forever, or what's?
Or even worse than that, resist and then have all your things thrown away because the police aren't going to stop.
They're coming no matter what.
Yeah.
And so what they did was they went to the city, and they're outside with stop the sweeps. They set up tents around the Believe, or in that grassy area. Yeah. Used to be grassy around the Believe sign. And they were doing these stop the sweeps protests, which aren't going to stop the sweeps. Like that area has to be cleared out. It must be, And what the question, one of their arguments, their biggest argument was that it's inhumane. This sweeping a camp is inhumane. And we're like, well, okay, what's inhumane about it? And you're displacing somebody. You're separating them from all their belongings. And the response, like, and this is what I said, because you want to know, like, am I right? Am I in the wrong? Should these sweeps be happening?
Sure.
Where should I stand? And you look at like, well, they kind of.
It's not black and white.
When it comes to separating people from their stuff, absolutely, we shouldn't separate. Even if they're hoarding, totally get it, right? It's difficult to separate people from their things, even if they just acquired them on the streets. However, when we force people to stay till the last day, they're more likely to get swept, with the thing. Like, it's difficult to take your things, right? We should be promoting folks. It's better to have, it's better to have a place. What am I trying to say? Like, is that like, we don't have to necessarily separate people from their things if we do it right.
Well, we can do anything we want to do if we do it right.
Yeah.
And that's what's kind of frustrating, is that we can do these things right. Like you just said, we talked earlier about DSM-1 and who's going to pay for the storage. And it would be really nice if you had the wherewithal to put together a sign, and you have the time to go sit in front of the council building, and you're putting up your tent, and you're doing the performance of the advocacy, to also do the next part, which is showing up for the building of what's next, like what's on the other side of the bridge kind of thing, because we don't have a lot of people right now that are brilliant about putting together a continuum of care for homeless. We need all the folks that we can get advocating for the different levels of housing and specialized housing that are needed to clear a shelter. That's where I hear crickets from this group.
And I remember getting frustrated because it's inhumane to take people's things. And that seems terrible. I wouldn't want anybody to take my stuff. And it's inhumane to displace people. Sure. But when you're homeless, you're always on someone else's property anyways.
It's inhumane to leave them alone in the park and let them deteriorate too.
And so like you have to like, so it's not like sweeps and to sweep or not to sweep. Either way, it's inhumane, right? There's an inhumane component to it, especially because we're homeless. And then you look at like, and then this is where like I got real frustrated with the whole gig, because you look at like the nature of the camps these size camps, and the culture of these size camps. For example, women experience homelessness a lot different than guys do. for sure, right? There's survival sex that takes place. There's play to stay down there that takes place. The women usually don't hold the tents. It's usually the males. And in order for a woman to get shelter for a night or a week, they have to exchange sexual favor. And this is an accepted thing, right? We just
Isn't
exchange.
this bizarre how there is an argument made about the shelter being unsafe because of these things, but then they're out advocating to keep a camp open, which is openly doing these things.
Yeah, well, and it's part of the culture. You're not going to get like we work with women down there. They're not like that's just what it is, and they accept it. And so having this camp, you accept this behavior, this exchange of sex for shelter, and there is that humane? Is that humane? You're like, which humane are you okay with? Are you okay with the moving somebody, or are you okay with somebody having to exchange sex for something? And then you also look at like for something very important, which is shelter. This is something they have to have, right? And we're having to exchange sex for it, and we're supporting this.
Or even protection. Like where we are knowingly, or we know that there are women who are participating in activity or for shelter or for protection, and we're aware of it. We're like, oh, that's just what they do.
Remember? Yeah, that's what we remember. I called you out the one time because that gal was being like, the guy finally got, I think he went to jail or something. And it was what you called the rabid dog syndrome, because it's a woman that's staying with a male, even though he abuses her, and even though he like exploits her, and even though he treats her like shit. It's better. He protects her.
Yeah.
No matter what.
And
no
it's
matter
familiar.
all that shit.
She knows what to expect in that versus not knowing what to expect in a new relationship. Yeah.
Yeah. And for some women, it's better to be to have one dog mauling you than 100 dogs mauling you. Yeah. And this is the culture like that we support when we allow these camps to stay unchecked, right? And then you also look at of course, there's going to be a vulnerable population. You have your folks down there that are on the spectrum. You have some autistic people that are on the streets, developmentally disabled folks. You have physically elderly folks. And these people's income, because some of them get disability checks, are being taken by the predators that live out there. And so when we're protecting this camp to stay the same, you're also protecting the predators that are
You're
victimizing.
protecting the culture.
Yeah, you're protecting the culture. And that bothered me so much. I'm like, you have to weigh this out. Like, what are you okay with? And unless you're willing to go out there, you want the camp to stay? Cool. Are you okay with the female abuse and the sexual assault and the
just the
manipulation
manipulation
and all the things? Are you okay with that? You're not okay with that. Well, then you need to manage that, right? If you don't want them to sweep, because it's one or the other now. Right? It's gone too far, and this is where we're at. So what do you want to do? And most people aren't willing to go out there and manage it. And sometimes it takes a little bit of shakeup, right, to get people to go to the shelter. Like people aren't going somewhere in an aha moment usually.
And I think that it's important too, just to say that it's not the clean camps that are safe, that are no complaints about, that are getting swept. Yeah. It's camps that these stories are coming out of. Multiple calls are happening. There's clearly, you can see with your eyes, there's issues happening around the camp. And so there's not even a distinction between fighting for a good camp versus a bad camp. It's just there's a fighting for no sweeps. Yeah. And that just seems like kind of a empty argument. Like if you're just fighting for no sweeps, then you're cool with all that goes on at the campsites, because that doesn't seem very pro-homeless to me. Like if you really cared about the homeless and you cared about them being in better circumstances or conditions, you would be getting into the weeds of that. And you would be figuring out could we, even if you're not formally supervising a campsite like you do, where you're not in contract or anything, you could be making a presence there every day in ways that would promote healthier behaviors, that would promote more safety, that would promote more cleanliness, and no one's preventing anybody from going out and doing those kinds of things.
Yeah. Like, and that was the main gig there. And you look at let's say that we're okay with sweeping the camps. Then what does a person do? And I'm telling you, most people do not shift or don't make that pivotal, life-changing decision when they're left unchecked, right? When a camp
we don't change in our comfort zone.
Yeah, no. So there has to be something that happens. There has to be a pivotal moment, and usually we get more people on the last day into
Yeah.
shelters, into treatment, into detox than we do any other time. Right? When they give you that 2 days, the first day or a week, nobody's moving before the day of.
Yeah.
Till those cops shows up and those dumpsters show up to clean up after you. Nobody I can't say that people have moved before, but very few move. It's the day of, right? And so it takes this moment. So I'm willing to have somebody be upset with me for a moment when there's an opportunity to change somebody for a lifetime.
Well, and if people really knew about like big change and big growth, it's generally some sort of trauma that really motivates you into a big change in your life anyways. So.
Oh God, I remember we went to this navigation center in Portland, and there was like 20, 40, there's so many tents on the outside of this navigation center, and you go inside and like it's only half the beds are full. And I'm like, why aren't those people in here? And they're like, well, we don't ask them to move at all. I'm like, well, yeah, okay, fair enough. Because there has to be something on the streets. We have to like move folks on the streets. It's because the rest of the community didn't ask for that. They didn't ask for that.
It's very interesting to me that there is just a huge lack of understanding around how behavior change happens with a lot of these places that are supposed to be helping people with behavior change. And so, like, if you're just waiting for them to have an inspiring moment, some of them will never have an inspiring moment their whole entire lives.
Yeah,
you go out.
hopefully.
Yeah, part of the job is to help find that inspiring moment. And that's why I mentioned about you speaking life into people, because you create an inspiration from that, which could motivate them right out of their tent that morning to possibly go do something they weren't thinking about doing until you came in and started talking to them. And just that navigation center, sending somebody out to walk that line every day and speak life into those people, like make some sort of an effort. We are the people that have the power, the authority, the resources. The ball is in our court.
Yeah, and that was, I remember, and I was like, oh, and I didn't want to get into the thing because I thought it was wild. I was like, well, there's freaking beds here.
Slow-hanging fruit right outside. You don't gotta do all that. Yeah, let's get them in. Yeah. And you know, and if there was prior experience, you have the control. You can talk that. You can speak to them. You can let them know that things are different than they used to be. We want you here. We want you to get to your. Do you want your own apartment? Yes or no? Yes, we can do that. Do you know? And then you just reverse engineer. You can do the things, right? And it's going to be tough. It's going to be a long conversation, but you can do that. And so I didn't want to have that conversation with her, but I was like, well, oh yeah, why? And she was like, because asking somebody to move their tent or asking someone to move is traumatic. We don't want to traumatize them. I'm like, is living on the streets traumatic? Like every day on the streets is traumatic. Why wouldn't if I had to pick a trauma, right? It would be the immediate, powerful trauma that moves me to the next phase in life. And life is fucking tough. It sucks. It's difficult. It's that's trauma avoidant, not trauma informed.
Yeah.
When we're avoiding pushing the person lightly to the next best thing, we're being trauma avoidant. We're scared of our trauma.
Yeah. It's like Liz says, she says, you know, it's a dance, right? You lead and then they lead, and you lead and then they lead, but you don't stop.
Yeah,
you know?
Never.
I remember a guy out there because they asked me, they're like, one of the people that were touring me identified that, like, because I'm like, that's weird that they don't move them. And I'm like, will you go talk to one of them? I'm like, yeah, shit, yeah, dude, I'll go talk to him. And there was, you know, the tents were, it was you know, they're blocking the sidewalk. Some were blocking the sidewalk. You had to navigate and weave in and out. They had like a little pathway, and there's all the bike parts and all the things. And I went to one tent. I'm like, what's up, big homie? And we start talking, and he told me that his gig is, I repair bikes, I fix bikes. And then, you know, the common, all I need is a job gig, and we'll get on that next week. Okay. Right? The all I need is a job stuff.
I'm just stuck here because I just need a job.
All I need is a job. We're going to do that next episode. But like, and it was that, right? And I'm like, all right, cool. Hey, listen, man, would you agree? And I'm trying to like angle like how footprint, right? Because right now when we're living on the sidewalk, right, you know, a lot of the argument for somebody setting their camp up on a sidewalk is that it's public property, and it's actually not anymore. It was until you put all your shit here. Now you just privatized it. The public doesn't have access to it. So so I was trying to angle this conversation with him. I was like, does it bother you when your neighbors like put stuff in front of your tent to where you can't get out, or lean stuff against your tent? And he's like, hell yeah, that bothers me, man. I can't stand that. And does it bother you when they get so much stuff that it kind of blocks the entrance to your tent, and and they're kind of impeding in your area. And he was like, yeah, man, that's bullshit. I hate when they do that. I'm like, well, then do you think that maybe it bothers the city and the navigation center here that maybe we're kind of blocking their sidewalk with all of your stuff? And he was like, wait a minute, are you telling me that the navigation center doesn't want me to camp here? And I was like, yeah, bud, I'm telling you that. And he was like, well, then why would they give me this tent? And I was like, fair enough, bro. I shook his hand, and that was it, right? So, like, we send mixed messages.
And you're allowed to say, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have given you that tent. I shouldn't have made you think that you could sleep here. We're allowed to go back and acknowledge that we made a mistake. You don't have to double down that you're right and then make it all weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also want to highlight, too, though, because I understand giving people shit or things when it's a harm reduction manner, when somebody is so cold they need a jacket.
Absolutely.
You get them a fucking jacket, bro. When someone's dehydrated, you get that dude water. When someone's starving, you take them the food. But you don't stop there, and that's our thing. We just want to hand some shit out and stop. And it's like, like Liz says, it's you don't have to always give things. It's about giving. You can give it yourself. You can give a conversation. You could talk to folks, and every conversation you have with somebody where you're slightly nudging them to the next phase, when you're showing them, I know if you're capable, and this is a conversation I have with a lot of folks on the streets, bro, if you're capable of living here on this river, in these streets, navigating all the crazy shit you have to do, waking up with nothing, but still surviving, you're resourceful, you're a risk taker, you're resilient. If you can do that, you could do anything. Yeah. Like, how incredible is that? And all you got to do is pivot these skills and these things that you already have. You're already doing it, homie. That's it. Do you know? And so those are that's how we should be given. That's how it's not about that we want people to just get out of here. We want them out of sight.
We have to move from doing these bridges to doing pathways. We do a lot of here's this thing to get you to the next we need to build the whole pathway out. And that's what you do when you start hand holding them through these things. Doing this, and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this. It isn't a hand you something, see you later, bud, hope it works out. And I think there's a lot of systems that are like that out there where and that's why I said you really have to check yourself to make sure you're not doing something to therapize yourself. Is this something that's really needed that's going to help advance this person or improve their circumstances or conditions? Or is this just making me feel better for the moment? And if it is, then acknowledge that. But you can't pretend that you're part of the bigger picture of really solving the problem.
Yeah, and that's that optics over outcomes gig that we always talk about. Well, we're getting ready to close out here. We're just in time. Thank you for joining us. Next episode, we're going to do All I Need Is a Job, in addition to other things. Thank you for joining us at
Good Intentions, Bad Outcomes. See you next time.
This is Monica. I'm Grant D. See you next time.